the more fun ways to deck build in Netrunner is to pick a certain card and build your deck around that card. Today, I'm building my deck around the new card released in Upstock, Power Tap, which rewards you with which is a resource that rewards you with 1 credit every time a trace is initiated. So I basically built my deck around this card, which means that I include Link and basically ways to leverage on taking traces. So this deck would work very well against decks that run lots of traces, such as NBN making use. Against such opponents, I would want to run their tracer eyes as much as I can, and I'll be rewarded for running these tracer eyes. So with high link, I'm able to beat most of the tracers, while Power Tap gives me free money for taking those tracers. So it's like running with bad publicity when you have a personal workshop installed. You're getting free credits for running. Your opponent is generating free credits for you, so that's great. And since I'm running Link, I might as well use Underworld Contacts as one of my means of income. So now let's get on with the game. This is probably the worst possible opponent I could ask for. It's Wayland. Wayland, this deck is suboptimal against Wayland because my Breaker Suite, or rather I should say my main breaker, is a single copy of Darwin. The reason for using Darwin is that Tracer Eyes tend to be high strength and sentries. So you want something that can break those cheap end-around code gates and barriers, especially against fast advanced decks, which are very common in the meta now. And what better way to do it than Darwin? Overmind does it pretty well as well, but Overmind can only be used so many times, whereas Darwin is permanent forever. So I chose to spend 3 influence on Darwin and also build around Darwin. And the problem with Darwin is that it fails to high strength eyes that are not tracers that cannot be clicked through. And Grindel has a lot of them. There's Hadrian's Wall, there's Archer, there's the new eyes, Taurus. He has a Taurus over his remote server, and it did so much work. It destroyed my Desperado. Now it's completely porous because I haven't installed any of my hardware, but I cannot afford to install my Rabbit Hole now, which is bad. I really need to install that Rabbit Hole to get my Underworld Contacts engine going. So meanwhile, in the meantime, the only thing I can do right now is to force him to rest the Chimera every single turn. That will keep him poor, and with a bank job to threaten, I can, if he doesn't rest the Chimera, he'll be giving me a big swing in credits. So what he does is to advance and score his geothermal fracking. Thankfully, it's not an over-advanced Atlas that will be more scary to deal with. He's on 0 credits now, so I get my bank job off for free, basically. That's the good thing about Taurus for the runner, is that if you have no hardware, it's completely porous, and your opponent just wasted 5 credits to install it. So I finally find my Darwin, and now it's time to charge it up. Now, Darwin is very vulnerable to virus purging, so you need to work around that. So because of that, I've included a couple of surges and a personal touch to ensure that I can get past the 0 to 4 strength ice even after a virus purge. The problem is, again, Wayland runs a lot of high strength ice beyond the 4 strength mark, and that proves to be pretty nasty. I throw away the Femme Fatale. I don't really have the credits to install it. My economy options in this deck are all very high impact. Bank Job gives me 8 credits, Account Siphon gives me 10. Underworld Contacts gives me 1, but over a long time they add up to be a lot of credits. So my economy is very, very packed. Every single economy card gives a lot of benefit. Even Armitage, it's a net gain of 11 once I click it off entirely. So I can actually keep up with Windows economy for the most part, which is a very good thing. And because he used both geothermal fracking counters to boost up from 0 to 14 threads, now I have 3 bad publicity, which is very good to use with my Darwin. I quickly installed the Rabbit Holes because I saw the power shutdown that he attempted to use on me. He couldn't use it because I didn't make a run. So now I need to install the rabbit holes as protection against power shutdown. Now I'm thinking of how to win. I know that card in the remote is not an agenda because he didn't score it. It's probably a Jackson Howard, so now I'm looking to attack his other servers. So I first set up with 3 strength Darwin, but he immediately purged it. So that's a problem. I'm back to square one, so I need to solidify my. I decided to take the time to solidify my economy instead. So that's the good thing about this deck. Even though I got virus purge, I can spend the time getting credits instead. The only problem is if he attempts to score an agenda immediately after a virus purge, which is exactly what he does here. In that case, I cannot contest it. He advances an ice outside of Taurus. I'm thinking it's a swarm. That would explain why he's advancing it. But little did I know that the outermost piece of ice was actually an ice wall, which would make a lot of sense. You would advance an ice wall against someone who is playing Darwin as the main breaker. I didn't think of that. I was just so afraid of the swarm. But had I known that it was a ice wall outside, I would have ran his remote server because I would be able to get through it easily. Although I would lose one hardware, that's a small cost, I suppose. But instead, I chose to go for the Cow Siphon, gambling that the outermost ice on HQ was not a worry. And then I exposed. Turns out it was an ice wall. So here I'm contemplating, because I know I can run through that server, but if I do and steal the agenda, I will be tagged at the end of my turn. If he has 2 Scorched Turfs in his hand, it's game over for me. Am I willing to take the risk? And am I going to allow him to bomb my underworld contacts because I'm tagged? I chose not to. Too risky. I think that was a mistake. That was a mistake because he managed to score an Atlas. So he's essentially on match point right now because he can tutor a hostile takeover anytime. So now, since he just got an agenda, I'm going to legwork in and basically raid his HQ wide open. I see the anonymous tip, archer, and a restructure. Alright. So yeah, I think that was a huge mistake on my part by misjudging the ice that he runs. No one runs Swarm these days, especially not in Window. Why would you run Swarm? It's such a pathetic. It's pretty much the worst program treasure out there. And it might be taxing, but if you're running Window with bad publicity, why would you want to tax the runner? The bad publicity is just going to work against you. So, yes, I finally find my personal touch, and I install it on the Darwin immediately. And just in time as well, because he purges virus counters. So, I think Underworld Context complements Darwin very well, because it always ensures that you have credits to pay for the pumping of Darwin. And now I have a search in hand, so this is going to really help me get through servers. Now, what he does is to install an ice on the remote and attempt to score an agenda in the remote. I know I need to contest it because if he scores a 3-2 or a 4-2, he wins the game the next turn with hostile takeover being tutorable by Atlas. Now, I saw the archer from his hand. I know that the outer piece of ice is very likely an archer because he knows that that's the only piece of ice that in his deck that can stop my Darwin. So what I did here was to search for my search. My second search. Couldn't find it. The single copy of search would take my Darwin to 4 virus tokens and 1 personal touch, which is 5 strength, just 1 strength short of breaking the archer. It's so painful. I'm just one strength short of getting through that server. So I couldn't get through that server. If I could force him to rest the archer, but that would come at a cost of me losing my Corroder and Darwin, and I cannot afford to lose my main breaker. So that's the downside with this deck. That is why this deck is so weak to Wayland. I think this establishes it pretty well. And yeah, it was so unfortunate. I couldn't stop him. he scored the geothermal fracking, and I knew that I only had one turn left to win the game. I just kept drawing to find the indexing, couldn't find it, so I conceded. This was a very painful game for me to play. Yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting a Wayland as my first matchup against this deck. This is my first time playing this deck, and I wanted to test it on a deck that actually works well against. HB and NBN are two good targets for me because HB runs ice such as Ichi1 and Ichi2, both of which have tracers in them. I can easily run through those tracers and gain credits of them. NBN is quite obvious. They run low strength ice, which Darwin easily takes care of, and the rest is done by the tracers. Whatever tracers they have, like Data Raven, Caduceus, Draco, all these are so porous to three rabbit holes combined with power tap. HB also runs Ash. That's what power tap does that Compromise Employee doesn't. I think to a lot of you who looked at power tap at first glance, it seems to be an inferior version of Compromise Employee. Compromise Employee gives you credits for beating tracers, and in addition rewards you for making the opponent res ice. So Compromise Employee works for all decks regardless of whether they run tracers or not, because every single deck runs ice. But power tap is situational. It only works against decks that run tracers, but it works against tracers that come from non-ice sources such as Ash, such as Mid-Season, Sea-Source, all these. So I'm looking to make power tap work. I hope I'm going in the right direction with this. If you have any comments or remarks on how I can improve my implementation of power tap into this silhouette deck, please give me some advice. Whether it be changing my ID, changing my breaker suite, changing my economic suite, do let me know. Comments much appreciated. Thanks for watching and have a good day.